Good morning, Paul, and happy birthday on behalf of Sumo.
Thank you very much, JJ. It's good to be with you all.
And how many languages has it actually been translated into?
Well, I think we're up to 13, including Australian, so that's going well.
Sumo is obviously it's a lovely acronym, and anyone who hasn't read the book, I'd say it's 15 years old, but it's still very, very valid to this day. But you do actually come from a psychology background, and I know you're a visiting professor at University of Chester.
I mean, my background is in behavioural and social psychology. I studied that back in the 1980s. But I would also argue that when I was studying psychology in the 80s, we mainly explored the psychology of failure. And it was only with Martin Seligman's work more in the 90s that we started to explore more of positive psychology. So I suppose I've really been a proponent of positive psychology for a number of years. But I think one of the things that really got me into almost like from psychology to personal development was actually when I was working with Unilever as a graduate management trainee, managing the 30 women on the economy beef burger line. I just remember thinking to myself, yeah, bring it on. When arrogance meets ignorance, that is a really dangerous cocktail. And what I realized is my 4-year degree had ultimately set me up for graduation, but I wasn't completely sure it had set me up to do well in life. I learned a lot from those 30 women, it's fair to say, but I became ill, nothing to do with the economy beef burgers, within a few months, with an illness called ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, yuppie flu, or chronic fatigue syndrome. So I lost my job, but it was during that time, it's my first ever exposure to what I guess was positive psychology. And the phrase went something like this and it was very relevant for today and for now. Within every adversity, there is a seed of equal or greater opportunity. Fast forward a few years when I'm kind of not fully recovered, because I wasn't. It was actually in 2002 that I came across this term sumo, and it was literally, I learned it as a phrase from I'm going to say a Scotsman. I don't know if it was a man or a woman, but I remember being in Glasgow running an event on coaching and counselling skills, and someone chipped up in and said, well, if all else fails, you can always tell them to sumo. Apologies if you're Scottish, you can sue me later. And everyone looks at this person and goes, sumo, hey, shut up, move on. Everybody laughed. I didn't think anything more of it, but would occasionally weave it into some of my talks. And just to clarify, shut up isn't necessarily meant to be as aggressive as it might sound. It's all about take some time out, stop, think, reflect, press pause. You could argue globally, we're in the middle of a big shut up moment, but then move on having done that reflection. So that's a brief whistle-stop tour of sumo.
I know emotional well-being is one of the big things you talk about, which ties in with the positive psychology. Where are we on the journey, if you will?
Well, on one level, it's hard to tell, because I have one of my little formulas that I have in my sumo book. And what's interesting is people going, oh, so you're talking about mental and emotional health now, are you? You know, I was talking about stress. It was my main topic in 1991. One of my previous books was called 59 Minutes to a Calmer Life, came out 19 years ago. And I wrote a book called How Not to Worry back in 2012. So this has been a really, really key topic for me, almost like for the last 30 years. But one of the things I talk about in sumo is this little formula, E plus R equals O. And it's the event plus our response that influences the outcome. I think we could be at the place where some of us have got bad news fatigue. One of the key things we've got to really focus on is, okay, we've had this event, but the outcome to the event is not based purely on the event itself. It's based on how I respond, how we respond. And so E plus R equals O is massively important, because if at the moment our reaction is one of panic, is one of fear, or is one of, well, there's nothing you can do, then I think you will end up with a very different outcome to the people and the organizations who are going, okay, this is a challenge. There are things out of our control, but what is in our control that we can do something about in order to make it a better outcome in the future. So in some ways, where are we at? It kind of all depends.
You mentioned the sort of gap between, so you mentioned the gap between knowledge and action. I assume that filters into this.
Now, our brains are probably the most complex thing we know on the planet. I represent it with a couple of baseball caps. So I say our fast brain is that primitive emotional part of our brain. It's that hunter-gatherer brain, and it's responsible for, above all, protecting us. So that's why you will have this phrase that will be familiar with, your fight or flight response. Or there's a few other F's actually it's responsible for, but one of them is, one of them you desire for food, but one of them is also your freeze response. So when we feel we're threatened in some way, then actually it's our red cap, our fast brain, that kicks in. But what's interesting is about our fast brain is, here we are in 2020, and yet every single one of us has an inner caveman or inner cave woman or inner cave dweller in our brain, our ancient brain. And so going through a crisis, one of the things we need to sort of be aware of is that, well, we've got this is our primary part of our brain. It's the strongest part of our brain. And if it had a catchphrase, it probably would be act first, think later. So we only need a little bit of information. That's why people can go into panic. And I came across this phrase recently, panic is primal. It's not a logical, rational response. It's primal. And there's that sense in which we're feeling threatened. And some of the threats clearly are absolutely genuine. And what we're going through in some people's lives is an absolute tragedy. But some of the panic is fueled by speculation and by fake news and by people expressing an opinion but presenting it as a fact. And that is, I represent that with your blue baseball cap. That is your higher brain. In evolutionary terms, it's the new kid on the block. And that's where you do your rational, logical thinking, where you do your reflecting, when you do your planning. Now, the reality is we need both to deal with life. This isn't bad. We owe our very survival as a species to fear, but sometimes we can be overwhelmed with fear or even false fears, and we can be panicking and reacting to situations. So I think in terms of moving forward, some of the knowledge we need isn't just about what's going on out there, it's about what's going on up here, and seeing how our red and blue cap brains can sometimes be helping us or hindering us. The other point I'd make is sometimes we have all the knowledge, we have the facts, we have the logical reasons why we should take action in life, but we don't feel particularly motivated to do so. And so in a lot of my work, I explore not just in what we're going through as a crisis, but, yes, I talk about resilience, emotional well-being, but I talk about leadership. And I talk about how do you get the best out of yourself. And part of how you get the best out of yourself is understanding, as I say, your red and blue cap and how both are necessary for us to be at our best. Sometimes everyone's just communicating at blue cap level. Well, when Martin Luther King tried to inspire a generation, he didn't go, I've got a strategic plan. He had a dream. And I think sometimes we can be over analytical in our communication, and we need the detail, but we also need to tap into the emotion. And that's why even now, because people say to me, what do leaders need to do to be supporting people at the moment? Well, there's a phrase that you'll be familiar with from years ago. And it was this, people won't remember what you said. People won't remember what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I can understand that, but I want to flip it and go, if you're a leader now, let me tell you this. When you're taking people and supporting people, 12 months down the line, I think there's a good chance some people will remember what you said. And they'll definitely remember what you did and how you made them feel.
Conspiracy theories, and obviously is that to do with the way the brain works?
Actually, you're spot on, JJ. It does have something to do with it because again, when we feel under threat, which clearly we do now, because it's not just we've got the virus, it's that all the scientists are saying we still don't know a lot about it and its behavior. So our brains don't like uncertainty. We don't like the unknown. And so what is really interesting is we crave information that can give us, in a sense, some answers. And so when you've got maybe some of these conspiracy theories, it operates on different levels, but one of it is, oh, I know what's really happened. You know, the coronavirus all started in a lab in Manchester to prevent Liverpool winning the Premier League. Okay, a joke, but there is this thing, I mean, it might be true, but there is this thing around how actually
You heard it here first.
conspiracy theories can give you some answers. The brain does not function well when we are living with so much uncertainty. So when someone says, I do have an answer, let me tell you what has been happening, and let me tell you about, it's to do with phone masks, it's to do with the conspiracy to do with this, then actually it's like that actually quite appeals to the brain. It can make me feel quite good and quite important because I know something that you don't know. I'm not part of the majority, I'm
Right.
part of the minority. And we've got some knowledge you haven't got, but we haven't been fooled like you. So actually conspiracy theories can, one, give us a sense of certainty and knowledge, but also can give us a sense of superiority because we think we're in on something that other people aren't.
Well, absolutely fabulous presentation, and really lovely
Thank
to link up with you again. I can't believe it's 15 years, but that's how time goes. So thank you to you, thank you to Sophie for arranging this, thank you to everybody else for tuning in, and we will see you all very soon at the next virtual event we put on. So thank you and goodbye.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.